In our last lesson, we discussed at great length what the concept of socialism means. That lesson introduced us to the fact that socialism refers to the social or public ownership of property. We learned how socialist ideas were spreading throughout Europe by the end of the 19th century, how many socialist associations and parties were coming to the being. Having talked about that, let us now travel to the eastern parts of Europe. Here we come to the Imperial Russia. In this lesson, we will be focusing on the social system that was in place in Imperial Russia. And from this, we will also understand what the reasons were that paved the way for socialism to gain power in Russia, and how all these factors together contributed to the Russian Revolution. So let us now begin this discussion on the Imperial Russia before the Revolution. The Russian Empire ruled from 1721 to 1917, and power in the Russian Empire was absolute in nature. That is to say, this Russian Empire was an absolute monarchy. In this, the Russian Empire's emperor held absolute and ultimate power in the land, and the Russian Empire was huge in size. It spanned across several places in Europe and Central Asia. What we see here is not the Russian Empire, but the modern day nations that came under the Russian Empire between 1721 and 1917. So the Russian Empire included the modern day nations of Russia, Finland, Estonia, Lithuania, Belarus, Latvia, parts of Poland, Ukraine, Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan. So what you see here are these nations in Europe and these three nations in Asia, which together comprised the Russian Empire. Now let us find out who ruled the Russian Empire. That is to say, who were the monarchs of this huge empire that ruled between 1721 to 1917. The House of Romanov reigned under the Russian Empire. Initially, it was called the Tsardom of Russia until the Russian Empire was formed in the year 1721. The Russian emperors were called Tsars. From this, I am sure you are questioning what this word Tsar means. Well, let us find this out. But before proceeding with this lesson, let me ask you a question. What were the Russian emperors called? Were they called earls, tsars, barons, or dukes? Well, the correct answer is tsars. The Russian Empire that was officially founded in the year 1721 was ruled by the tsars, who were the Russian emperors. So let us now find out what this word Tsar means. The word Tsar means Caesar in Latin. Caesar in Latin refers to an emperor in the European medieval sense of the term. Emperor who was equal in stature and power with the Roman emperor. But the Western European powers believed that the Tsar was equal to a king. From this, what we need to remember is that the Tsars were autocratic emperors in Imperial Russia. We learned that Imperial Russia was an absolute monarchy, and so these Tsars' say used to be final. There was nothing beyond the Tsar's rule in Imperial Russia. Peter I became the first emperor of Imperial Russia in the year 1721, and the Imperial Russian Empire officially came to an end with the abdication of Tsar Nicholas II in 1917. So Peter I officially founded the Russian Empire in 1721, and Tsar Nicholas II was the last Russian Tsar until his abdication in the year 1917. Having talked about how power was in Imperial Russia, that is to say, how it was an absolute monarchy, let us now briefly focus on the religion of the state in Imperial Russia. The majority religion in the Russian Empire was Russian Orthodox Christianity, and this had grown out of the Greek Orthodox Church. So, Russian Orthodox Christianity was the state religion of Imperial Russia. At the same time, many sections of the population were Catholics, Protestants, Muslims, and Buddhists. So, Russian Orthodox Christianity was the state religion of the Russian Empire. Now, let us focus on the economic system in Imperial Russia. Around 85% of the population of the Russian Empire consisted of agriculturists in the beginning of the 20th century. Now, this figure was higher than the proportion of agriculturists in places like England, France, where around 40 to 50% of the population were agriculturists. So many people were agriculturists in the Russian Empire in the beginning of the 20th century. Russia was a major exporter of grains, and so all these various crops that were produced in the Russian Empire constituted a huge source of income for the empire's treasury, and this happened till the beginning of the 20th century. But here a very pertinent question is left to be addressed. That is to say, why do you think, despite the Industrial Revolution, so many Russian people were agriculturists even till the beginning of the 20th century? We know that the Industrial Revolution had changed the socio-political cultural landscapes of England as well as other West European places by the 18th and the 19th centuries. Through the 18th and the 19th centuries, so many changes and developments were taking place in the Western European places. But the effects of the Industrial Revolution reached the Russian Empire by the end of the 19th century. And when the Industrial Revolution reached this place, many new industries and factories sprang up in places like St. Petersburg or other urban places in Western and Central Russia. So Moscow, St. Petersburg became the new industrial hubs during this time. By the 1890s, extension of railway network also happened, and the extension of railway network also proved very crucial for the growth of industries and factories in the Russian Empire, simply because it was now much more easier for the people to transport the raw materials as well as the finished goods to and from the factories and industries. At the same time, foreign investments also started pouring in, and coal mines were also being mined at a very fast pace. So all these reasons now contributed to an extensive industrialization in the Russian Empire by the end of the 19th century. So agriculture was predominant in the Russian Empire till the beginning of the 20th century, but it was by the end of the 19th century that Russia was also in the process of becoming an industrialized region. And so the number of workers in factories and industries was often at par with the number of craftspersons, with the number of agriculturists even. Now, a very important point that we need to discuss here is with respect to the ownership of these factories and industries. Now, though socialism was spreading throughout Europe and it was in the process of making its way to Russia as well, socialist governments had still not been established. And so, the erstwhile social system was not really replaced. These factories and industries in Imperial Russia were private properties. So these factories and industries that now started springing up were owned by either one individual or a group of individuals. And here the workers were compelled to work for even 15 hours at times. So the conditions of the workers in these factories and industries in Imperial Russia were quite miserable. And so, can you understand how this was laying the stage for socialism to enter Russia? Because these people were being exploited by the factory owners, by the industry owners. And in our last lesson, we learnt about how private ownership of property is at the foundation of capitalism. So, these factories and industries in Imperial Russia were capitalist enterprises, and these factory owners only sought to maximize their profits. They did not really take care of those people who contributed to the production units in the factories and industries. So, the workers, the laborers in the factories and industries were reduced to almost nothing. They remained at the lowest rung of the society with respect to the class they belonged to. Now, the workers were overworked, as we just mentioned. Can you imagine having to work for 15 long hours in a day, and that too for a meager wage? These people were not well paid, they were not even well fed, and they had to live in dormitories. So in these bunkers in the dormitories, too many people were crammed together. And proper hygienic conditions were also not maintained in these dormitories. So poor sanitation, unhealthy living conditions, absolutely miserable lives in both the factories as well as the dormitories were all that kept these factory workers company. So these people were being exploited in the truest sense of the term. And from this, what we can infer is that this oppression that was meted out to them, this exploitation of labor in the factories and the industries, was actually the stepping stone that paved the way for the Russian Revolution. Now, the factory workers were also not a homogeneous unit. Some workers had links with the villages they hailed from, but many had started living permanently in the cities or the industrial units where they worked. So in this way, the workers were also divorced from their families. They were not allowed to go homes, and only occasionally some workers went back to the villages that they hailed from. Now, differences among the factory workers were also evident from their dresses as well as their manners. In fact, a steel factory worker at St. Petersburg mentioned that the steel factory workers considered themselves the aristocrats. Their work demanded more labor, intelligence and skill. And it is from these two pictures that it is evident that there were differences among the various workers. This is a steel factory worker and this is a worker in some other factory. Just from his shabby clothes and his good uniform, we will be able to say how differences were prevalent among the various groups of workers. So it seems as if there was a hierarchy among the workers as well, and the steel factory workers placed themselves at the top of this hierarchy in Imperial Russia. Now, during this time, a very important thing that was happening is that women were also becoming a part of the industrial machinery. Because around this time, women contributed to around 31% of the labor force by the year 1914. But a very unfortunate thing that happened to women despite toiling just as much as men is that they were not paid at par with men. So they were paid either half or 3/4 of the wages that were received by men. So gender inequality was also present with respect to the laborers' wages. If I am being oppressed for a long point of time, I will be pushed to the edge. And there will be the wall behind me after a point of time. But when I cannot be pushed any further, I will now retaliate. I will bounce back in protest, in revolution. And this is what was happening with the workers in Imperial Russia. Only one thing that united them all is the oppression and the exploitation that were meted out to them. So all the workers, be that the steel factory workers or the workers in other factories and industries, were exploited by the factory owners. And so these people often used to gather and unite on the grounds of protesting against the oppression meted out to them. And they frequently went on strikes against the factory owners. What do we understand by strikes? By strikes, we mean that these people stopped working. And these people were the basic units that had the capitalist machineries running. Because if these people stopped working, then the factory owners would not be able to make their factories or industries run. These people were very vital for the functioning of any industry or factory. And so when these people went on strikes, the factory owners were also pushed to the edge. Many such strikes happened frequently between 1896 and 1897 in the textile industry. And in 1912, many such strikes happened in the metal industry. So the spirit of protesting and revolting against the oppression and exploitation of them at the hands of the factory owners was now spreading among the masses. So the spirit of protesting and revolting against the factory owners was now spreading among the factory workers and laborers. Earlier on, we learned how the agriculturists also constituted a very important force in Imperial Russia. Because we learned that till the beginning of the 20th century, around 85% of the entire population was involved in agriculture. And so when these people were pursuing agriculture, not all peasants had very unified responses to the work that they had to do. Now many peasants respected the nobility, the nobles, the crown, as well as the aristocrats who used to own the lands which were worked upon or cultivated by the peasants. And many peasants were very holy and religious. At the same time, they also believed in the hierarchy. They respected the nobles who owned the lands. Now these nobles were the ones who were given power by the crown. So the Tsars gave the nobles the power to own lands, and on those lands these peasants used to work. But many peasants revolted against the nobles. They felt that they were not being paid well by the nobles. They were being exploited by the nobles when they were the ones without whom the lands could not be cultivated, without whom grains and crops could not be grown. So many peasants often refused to pay rents to the nobles. They demanded that the nobles should give them the lands on which they would work. And when the nobles refused to do so, they also murdered them. So the peasants were also divided in terms of their respect and their relationship with the nobility. Just a while ago, we mentioned that in the year 1902, many strikes happened in the metal industry. In the same year itself, that is in 1902, peasant protests broke out locally in South Russia. and by the year 1905 these spread throughout the empire. So the workers, peasants, people from the lowest classes, from the lowest rungs of the society were now up in rebellion against the capitalist enterprises, against the affluent propertied class. This is because this kind of a protest was inevitable. The peasants were being exploited for so long. They were not given their due wages. At the same time, they had to pay very high rents to the nobility, to the landowners, and the landowners kept on amassing more and more wealth, just like the factory owners. And so all these workers and peasants were breaking out in rebellion. And this was actually laying the stage or the foundation for socialism to now pervade the minds of these people. These people, by the next few decades, would be completely against the private ownership of property, as we will be learning in the course of our subsequent lessons. In Imperial Russia, a new system that was in place was known as the commune system. What do we understand by this commune system? Now, these communes were associations of certain peasants' households, and these peasant households used to take care of their own interests. More often than not, one village used to have one commune, or several villages often had more than one communes. So these communes were communities of the peasants' households, and they came together to periodically pool their arable lands. What does this mean? This means that under the commune system, the arable lands or the cultivable lands were pooled together, and when these lands were pulled together or these lands were gathered together in one unit, those were then distributed among peasant households according to their sizes and needs. Allow me to explain this to you here so that you can understand what this commune system means. So this commune was a community of peasant households, and this commune system allowed the peasants to gather their lands together, to pool their cultivable lands periodically. So now different tracts of lands are pooled together, and there is one big unit. And then this one big tract of land would be distributed among various peasant households depending on the size as well as the need of those peasant households. This was to ensure that no peasant household got access to more land than it required. And in this way, the profit or revenue earned from the lands was made equitably distributed. So all these peasant households had access to that amount of land that they required for their sustenance. No peasant household had more than it required. No peasant household got the power to amass more and more revenue. So this kind of a healthy relationship or cooperation among the peasants in Imperial Russia under the commune system helped them better their living conditions, because they were now able to get whatever they wanted, and this was determined by the commune system. Now in this lesson we have talked at great length on various things, be that the political system that was in place in Imperial Russia, the economic system that was in place in Imperial Russia. We learned how the factory workers, the peasants, were exploited by the wealthy propertied class in Imperial Russia, and this had sown the seeds of resentment and rebellion in the minds of these people. And this also facilitated the spread of the idea of socialism as well as communism among the various sections of the population. In the course of our next few lessons, we will learn about the socio-political system in not just Russia but throughout Europe in great length, so as to understand the reasons and the factors which contributed to the Russian Revolution. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon. You can also register for free at DeltaStep.com or download the DeltaStep app to learn one-to-one with our amazing teachers or to get access to all our 5,000 plus amazing videos as per your school syllabus. Master each topic with our adaptive practice technology. Get million plus questions with step-by-step solutions and unlimited mock tests. Get all your doubts resolved instantly. Learn via games and win amazing prizes like PlayStations and iPads. So at DeltaStep, learning is not just fun and easy, it's rewarding too. So register for free now.